You wake up and before your eyes even fully open, it starts. That voice, that quiet, persistent, relentless voice that reminds you of everything you did wrong yesterday, everything you might fail at today, every embarrassing moment from 3 years ago that somehow still feels as fresh and sharp as the day it happened. You haven't even put your feet on the floor yet, and already your mind is a battlefield. The sheets are still warm, the room is still dark, and yet the war has already begun. And here is what nobody ever tells you about that voice. It isn't the truth, it isn't wisdom, it isn't your instinct trying to protect you or your conscience trying to correct you. It is noise, deeply accumulated noise from years of comparison, rejection, fear, failure, and self-doubt that has been layered so thoroughly into your thinking patterns that you have started, somewhere along the way, to mistake it for who you actually are. You've started to believe that the voice is you, that the critic is the self, that the storm is the sky. But what if I told you that the mind you were born with, the original, clear, undisturbed, genuinely curious mind you had before life started loading weight onto it, is still there? It hasn't gone anywhere. It hasn't been destroyed or permanently damaged or irreversibly changed. It has been buried. And buried things, no matter how deep, can always be uncovered. What you are about to hear is not theory pulled from a textbook. It is not inspiration designed to feel good for 20 minutes and fade by the time you make your next cup of coffee. This is practical, this is grounded, this is rooted in how the human mind actually functions and how real, lasting psychological freedom is built, not in a single dramatic moment, but through consistent, honest, daily practice. And by the time we reach the end of this, you are going to understand something about the architecture of your own mind that most people go their entire lives never realizing, never questioning, and never escaping. But before we get there, there is one specific thing happening inside your brain right now, silently, beneath the surface of every thought you consider yours, that is making every toxic thought you have ever had feel 10 times more powerful than it actually deserves to be. And we are going to pull it out into the open completely. Stay with me. Let us begin with the first and perhaps most foundational thing you need to understand, because without this, nothing else in this conversation will fully land. Most people believe that toxic thoughts are a sign of weakness. They carry a deep, often unspoken shame around the darkness of their inner life. They believe that mentally strong people, the ones who seem grounded, focused, and at peace, simply do not have these thoughts. That somewhere in the world there exist human beings who wake up each morning with clarity and calm, who move through their day without being ambushed by self-doubt, who fall asleep at night without replaying painful memories or rehearsing imagined future disasters on an endless loop. And when these same people look at their own minds, cluttered, anxious, self-critical, heavy with thoughts they would never admit to having out loud, they feel ashamed. They conclude that something is broken in them specifically, that they are uniquely flawed, that everyone else is navigating life with an inner peace they somehow missed the memo on. This is perhaps the most damaging lie that modern culture has sold us about mental health. The truth, when you actually understand how the human brain is structured and what it was designed to do, is almost the precise opposite of that story. Every functioning human brain produces what neuroscientists call automatic negative thoughts. These are not character defects. They are not evidence of psychological fragility or moral failure. They are evolutionary survival mechanisms that your brain inherited from ancestors who needed them desperately to stay alive in a world that was genuinely, physically dangerous. Your brain was not designed to make you happy. It was designed with extraordinary precision to keep you alive. And to accomplish that mission, it developed a very powerful bias toward threat detection, toward scanning the environment for danger, toward anticipating rejection, failure, and social exclusion. Because in ancestral communities, rejection from the group was not merely painful, it was often a death sentence. So the brain became extraordinary at finding problems, amplifying danger signals, and generating worst-case scenarios before they could become reality. In ancient environments, this made your ancestors dangerous survivors. In modern environments, it makes ordinary people chronically miserable. The brain that once helped your great-great ancestors detect predators in the grass is now detecting the slightly flat tone in your friend's text message and constructing an entire narrative about how they secretly hate you. It is detecting the micro-expression on your boss's face during a meeting and concluding with complete conviction that you are about to be fired, publicly humiliated, and professionally finished. It is the same mechanism, the same neurological hardware, catastrophically misapplied to a world it was never built to navigate. Once you truly understand this, not intellectually, not as a fun fact, but in the marrow of your understanding, something genuinely important begins to shift. You stop receiving every dark and cruel thought as if it were divine transmission. You stop treating your worst inner narratives as though they were reliable dispatches from reality. You begin to see thoughts for what they are at the most fundamental level: electrical signals, pattern responses, biological noise generated by an organ that is doing exactly what it was built to do in a world where that programming is wildly outdated. Not truth, not prophecy, not revelation, just firing neurons executing old code. And that single shift in perspective, that one reframe, is where every genuine conversation about mental freedom must begin. Because you cannot free yourself from something you believe is you. You can only free yourself from something you can finally see clearly enough to examine. The second thing you must understand, and this is the one that the most suffering people in the world have the hardest time truly accepting, is that you are not your thoughts. Now I know that sounds like something printed on a wellness calendar. I know you may have heard it before and let it pass through you without landing anywhere real, but I'm asking you to stay with it for longer than you normally would, because the gap between intellectually knowing this phrase and actually experiencing it as true in your own moment-to-moment life is one of the most significant psychological distances a human being can close. Right now, as you engage with these words, there is a dimension of you that is aware. It is witnessing. It notices when a wave of anxiety moves through your chest. It registers when a cruel thought about your worth or your future or your past surfaces in your mind. It observes the emotion, the physical sensation, the quality of the mental weather, and it is doing this observing from somewhere. That somewhere is not the thought itself. There is a you that exists behind and beneath the thinking, a you that is watching the thoughts happen. And that observer, that witness, is never destroyed by what it watches. Ancient philosophical traditions understood this with remarkable clarity thousands of years before modern neuroscience arrived at the same conclusion through an entirely different road. Stoic philosophers called it the ruling faculty, the part of the self capable of standing apart from impressions and choosing how to respond to them. Eastern contemplative traditions described it as pure awareness, the spacious, unchanging background against which all mental events arise and dissolve. Contemporary cognitive science calls it metacognition, the mind's capacity to think about its own thinking. The names are different. The territory they are all pointing toward is identical. You are the sky. The thoughts are clouds. The clouds can be dark, heavy, dramatic, threatening. They can cover the sky so completely and for so long that you forget the sky exists behind them. But the sky is never damaged by its clouds. It never becomes the storm. It never requires the storm to end in order to be fully itself. It remains constant and intact no matter what weather passes through it. When you begin to practice relating to your thoughts from the position of that observer, not suppressing them, not engaging in warfare with them, not dramatically fleeing from them, but simply watching them arise, exist, and pass with a quality of calm curiosity, you interrupt a pattern that may have been silently governing your life for years. That pattern is called cognitive fusion. Fusion is the state in which you are so completely merged with a thought that you do not experience it as a mental event. You experience it as reality itself. When the thought says you are not good enough and you don't hear it as a thought but receive it as an established and immovable fact about yourself and your place in the world, that is fusion. When the thought says nothing will ever change, and rather than noticing a pessimistic mental pattern, you find yourself nodding in defeated agreement, that is fusion. Almost all chronic toxic thinking, the kind that follows you everywhere, that resists every logical argument you make against it, that survives every good day and reasserts itself the moment things get quiet, is maintained by fusion. And the way out is not to fight the thought or replace it with a more positive version or repeat affirmations until the darkness retreats. The way out is to diffuse, to step back into the observer position, to shift from I am not good enough to I notice I am having the thought that I am not good enough. That small, seemingly insignificant linguistic shift creates psychological distance. Distance creates the possibility of choice, and choice, genuinely felt choice about how to relate to your own inner experience, is the beginning of what freedom actually feels like from the inside. The fourth way requires a form of courage that does not look dramatic from the outside, but is among the most difficult things a human being can actually do. It asks you to stop running. When a toxic thought arrives, when the shame surfaces suddenly in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, when the anxiety spikes without apparent reason, when the inner critic begins its detailed and personalized monologue about everything that is wrong with you, the overwhelming human impulse is to do one of exactly two things. You fight it or you flee from it. You engage in furious internal argument, trying to logic your way out of the feeling, presenting counter-evidence to the cruel voice in your head as though you are in a courtroom and your own well-being is the verdict, or you escape. You reach for your phone, for food, for noise, for any sensory input that will drown out the discomfort before it has time to fully register. Both strategies feel like they are working in the immediate moment. Both strategies, practiced over time, make the original problem significantly worse. The reason is a principle that psychologists call experiential avoidance. The more consistently and energetically you work to avoid a particular thought or feeling, the more psychologically central that thought or feeling becomes in your inner life. The effort of suppression keeps the suppressed thing alive and growing. When you fight a thought, you are in an intimate and sustained relationship with it. When you distract from a feeling, you are not dissolving it or resolving it or sending it away. You are storing it. And stored emotions do not remain neutral in the body over time. They compress under pressure, they accumulate with other stored things, and they return when the distraction finally falls away, with considerably more intensity than they arrived with the first time. The alternative is something that goes by different names in different traditions: radical acceptance, willingness, diffusion, allowing. But the core practice is identical across all of them. You stop trying to make the feeling go away. You allow the thought to exist without arguing with it. You observe the emotion with genuine curiosity rather than activated fear. You notice exactly where it lives in your body, the specific tightness across your chest, the specific heaviness in your stomach, the particular quality of tension behind your eyes, and rather than bracing against those sensations or trying to breathe them away, you breathe directly into them. You stay, and when you stay, something happens that seems impossible until you have experienced it enough times to trust it. The emotion peaks. It intensifies for a moment, sometimes uncomfortably so, and then, without you doing anything to stop it, it crests and it breaks and it begins to dissolve. Every emotion, no matter how overwhelming it feels in the moment, has a biological duration. Neuroscience suggests that a pure emotional wave, one that is not re-triggered by additional thought, runs its physiological course in approximately 90 seconds. 90 seconds. The reason your emotions feel like they last for hours or days or weeks is not that they are actually lasting that long. It is that your thoughts keep re-triggering them. You feel a moment of rejection, and then your mind immediately retrieves every other rejection you have ever experienced. And the retrieved memory re-triggers the feeling, and the intensified feeling generates more thought, and the thought generates more feeling. And the cycle accelerates until what began as one moment of ordinary pain has transformed into what feels like an immovable and permanent condition. When you interrupt that cycle by staying with the original feeling rather than feeding it with thought, the wave rises and it falls, and on the other side of it is something genuinely and surprisingly quiet. Not emptiness, not numbness, quiet. The kind of quiet that feels earned. The fifth way involves your environment, and it goes far deeper than advice about removing negative people from your life. That advice, while pointing in a useful direction, is too simplistic and too often weaponized as an excuse to avoid difficult but important relationships, rather than genuinely protecting the quality of your mental life. The mechanism through which the people around you actually shape your inner world operates at a level far more fundamental than conscious influence or verbal advice. The mechanism is called social mirroring, and it operates through the nervous system before the conscious mind even has a chance to evaluate what is happening. Mirror neurons, specialized neural circuits that fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing it, mean that extended proximity to another person is not merely an emotional experience, it is a neurological one. The anxiety that someone else carries in their body becomes an input to your nervous system. The habitual thought patterns that govern how they speak about themselves, about possibility, about other people, about the future, these patterns begin to shape the grooves along which your own thinking flows, not through deliberate transmission, through something far more primitive and far harder to guard against consciously. The question you need to sit with honestly is not, are there toxic people in my life? That question, while not wrong, leads to a kind of social scorekeeping that ultimately serves nobody. The more useful question is, who in my life, after I spend significant time with them, leaves me feeling more capable, more clear, more like the fullest version of what I am trying to become? And who leaves me feeling smaller, foggier, more doubtful, more resigned to limitations I had been working hard to push against? That discernment, made and remade honestly over time, becomes the basis for the most important architectural decisions of your mental life. It also extends to your digital environment, which is where most people dramatically underestimate the psychological damage being done to them quietly and continuously. Every account you follow, every podcast that plays in your ears during your commute, every comment section you wander into before bed is an input to your nervous system and your thought patterns. The curation of that input is not a trivial preference. It is a form of mental hygiene as consequential as anything else discussed in this entire conversation. The sixth way is about the story you are telling, not to other people, to yourself. Every human being carries a narrative, a constructed account of who they are, why their life has gone the way it has, and what is possible for them moving forward. And within that narrative, you play a role. The single greatest predictor that psychologists studying narrative identity have found for resilience, forward momentum, and genuine psychological well-being is not the nature or severity of what has happened to a person. It is how they narrate it to themselves. Two people can go through identical circumstances, the same betrayal, the same professional failure, the same devastating loss, and arrive at entirely different inner worlds based entirely on the story they have built around the experience. One story positions the person as a victim of events, defined by what was done to them, carrying as its central conclusion that the world is fundamentally against them and that they are fundamentally insufficient. The other story positions the person as a protagonist, someone who went through something genuinely terrible, who suffered real damage, who perhaps failed in real ways, but who carries from that experience something that now belongs to them completely. knowledge earned through pain, strength that could only have been built through that specific difficulty, clarity about what actually matters that comfortable times never could have produced. The story you are currently telling yourself about who you are is not objective truth. It is a construction. It was built from selected memories, inherited interpretations, and conclusions drawn in moments when you were perhaps not in the best position to be drawing conclusions. And like all constructions, it can be deliberately rebuilt, not by lying to yourself, not by pretending the painful chapters did not happen or did not matter, but by asking with genuine and sustained honesty, where in this story do I exercise agency? Where even in the hardest moments did I make a choice? Where did I keep moving when everything in me wanted to stop? Pull that thread, make it central. Because the self that went through hard things and came out still standing, still questioning, still here is a significantly more accurate and significantly more useful story than the one most people are quietly living inside of. When your actions are chronically and repeatedly inconsistent with your real values, your nervous system maintains a precise and unflinching account of the discrepancy. It does not announce this loudly or dramatically. It registers it as background noise, as low-level and persistent guilt, as the meaninglessness that settles in after accomplishments you thought would feel better than they do, as the specific restlessness of a person who is busy but not purposeful, productive but not fulfilled. And when the mind goes searching for an explanation for that persistent and nameless unease, it almost always lands on the nearest available narrative. You are not good enough. You are a fraud. You are permanently behind, when the actual and correctable cause is both simpler and more hopeful than any of those stories. You are out of alignment. The practice of returning to alignment does not require a dramatic life overhaul. It requires two honest questions asked in genuine silence without the noise of justification or excuse. First, what do I actually believe makes a life worth living? Not what I have been told, not what would impress the people whose opinion I am still unconsciously seeking. What do I genuinely and most deeply believe? Second, where, in my honest and observable daily life, do my actions reflect that belief, and where do they contradict it? The gap between those two answers is the exact location of your work, not 10 things. One thing, one specific, concrete, daily action that closes that gap, however slightly, between the person you are living as and the person you most deeply know yourself to be. Because the mind that is aligned, that acts in consistent accordance with what it genuinely believes, generates a fundamentally different quality of inner life. Not perfect, not free from difficulty or darkness or fear, but clean. There is a quality of psychological cleanness available to a person who is living with honest integrity that no cognitive technique, no therapeutic framework, no quantity of positive affirmations can manufacture as a substitute. It has to be earned through the repeated and costly choice of the honest, harder thing over the comfortable, easier one. And when you begin that practice, imperfectly, inconsistently, with genuine failures along the way, the mind begins to quiet in a way that is qualitatively different from anything else described in this conversation. Not because the toxic thoughts have been eliminated, but because the ground in which they once found deep purchase has been cleared and made clean. So here is where we have arrived. 8 ways, not 8 shortcuts, not 8 steps to permanent inner peace delivered in a single sitting. 8 directions of real and sustainable practice that, taken together and lived with genuine consistency, begin to do something that the suffering version of you may genuinely believe is impossible. Not silence the mind because the mind cannot and should not be silenced, but transform your relationship to it so fundamentally and so durably that even the darkest and most convincing thought loses its power to define you, direct you, or determine what your life becomes. You were born with a clear mind. Life, with all of its weight, its comparisons, its betrayals, its conditioning, its accumulated grief, layered noise over that clarity. But the clarity itself was never destroyed. It was never permanently damaged. It has been waiting beneath everything that has been added to it, for you to remember that it was always there and to begin the patient work of returning to it. That return is not a single dramatic moment of transformation. It is 1,000 small and mostly invisible choices made in the ordinary moments of an ordinary day. It is breathing through the discomfort instead of escaping it. It is watching a thought from the position of the observer instead of becoming it. It is moving your body on the mornings when your mind insists on stillness. It is having the honest conversation with yourself about the gap between how you are living and what you actually believe. It is choosing one day at a time with full knowledge that you will not always succeed, to protect your mental environment with the same seriousness and care with which you would protect anything else you know you cannot afford to lose. None of this is easy. If it were easy, the world would look strikingly different from the way it currently does. But every single person engaging with these words right now has already done hard things. You have already survived circumstances you were not certain you would survive. You have already rebuilt, however imperfectly, after losses you were not certain were survivable. You already carry inside you the precise capacity this work requires. The only question, the one that matters most and that only you can answer, is whether you are willing to turn that capacity deliberately inward. And I genuinely want to know where you are in this. Of everything we have explored today, the observer mindset, the body as the foundation of mental clarity, sitting with discomfort rather than fleeing it, the narrative you have built around your life, the environment you are allowing to shape your nervous system, the quality of your focus, the alignment between your values and your actions. Which one, if you are completely and courageously honest, is the single hardest for you to actually practice in the real conditions of your real life? Tell me in the comments below, because the answer you give might reveal something about where your work truly begins that even everything said here today has not yet fully uncovered.